Hello family, BL Carter here, hoping that you are doing well and working on your puzzle one piece at a time. Wanted to shed some light for those of you who may not be aware as of yet about House Resolution number 8 and the red flag gun laws that are being enacted around the country to circumvent your Second Amendment right to bear arms. So without much talk about it, let's go ahead and dig in. Okay, so first stop is Wikipedia. And we see as of January 27th, 2019, the day that I pulled this file, a red flag law is a gun violence prevention law that permits police or family members to petition a state court to order the temporary removal of firearms from a person who may present a danger to others or themselves. A judge makes the determination to issue the order based on statements and actions made by the gun owner in question. After a set time, the guns are returned to the person from whom they were seized unless another court hearing extends the period of confiscation. So, and it goes on to say such orders are known as extreme risk protection orders in Oregon, Washington, Maryland, Vermont, risk protection orders in Florida, gun violence, etc., etc. Now, as of my last check, we've got about 30 states that either have active laws or in process of activating laws to seize people's guns based on alleged being a danger to self or others. And then there's some other things we'll see on further down the road as we get into. Next, let's look at the actual House Resolution number 8 from the 116th Congress. And what they call it, they don't call it red flag gun laws. They call it Bipartisan Background Checks Act of 2019. Notice it says bipartisan. So, it's already passed the House. It's already passed the Senate. I'm sorry, it's not already passed the House. It's being sponsored by both House and Senate. It's got approvals. Everyone's on board with it pretty much. And we'll get into that a little later as well. There's only one version of the bill, and you can go to the congress.gov and read the entire content, but there are just a couple things I wanted to highlight. It says in Section 2, the purpose of this act is to utilize the current background checks process in the United States to ensure individuals prohibited from gun possession are not able to obtain firearms. Well, let me ask a question. If we currently have a background check process in place, and everywhere that I've lived and had a firearms license, the same prohibitions that they seek to target are already targeted, so what's the point of this new law? Unsure, but we'll go on down. As we go further, we'll see the point, because it's not to really focus on, in my opinion, those with mental issues or who may be a danger to self or others. That's already designed into the laws around the country, even in the shall issue states. If there is a mental issue or you've got a criminal conviction, etc., you're already prohibited. So that's already in place. But what we see here is it shall be unlawful for any person who is not a licensed importer, licensed manufacturer, or licensed dealer to transfer a firearm to any other person who is not so licensed, unless a licensed importer, licensed manufacturer, or licensed dealer has first taken possession of the firearm for the purpose of complying with subsections. So what that says is, when you go to the firearm shows, the gun shows, you can't purchase a weapon unless that person is a licensed dealer and goes through a proper transfer process. And of course, as you'll learn later, if you don't already know, that transfer process requires some paperwork that must be submitted. Going further down, paragraph 2, a transfer that is a loan or and this shall not apply to a transfer that is a loan or bona fide gift between spouses, domestic partners, parents and their children, siblings, aunts, uncles, and their nieces and nephews, or between grandparents and their grandchildren. So supposedly, my husband could purchase, a rifle for me tomorrow and give it to me as a Christmas present. Or my mom could buy me a weapon, or siblings, or etc. The transfer to an executor, administrator, trustee, or personal representative of an estate or trust that occurs by the operation of law upon the death of another person. So you could receive a weapon passed down from one of your relatives that have passed away, as long as it goes through the proper process of courts and trustees, will executors, etc. So you've got to go through estate probate in order to get, your daddy's gun when he passes away. It also doesn't apply to a temporary transfer that is necessary to prevent imminent death or great bodily harm if the possession by the transferee lasts only as long as immediately necessary to prevent the imminent death or great bodily harm. So what that says is, if I'm in my home and someone's trying to break in or whatever the case may be, I can temporarily transfer my firearm to my nephew who might be here, and he can use that firearm to shoot and even kill someone who's breaking into the home trying to kill us, or whatever the case may be. Section E says it does not apply. Paragraph 1 does not apply to a transfer that is approved by the Attorney General under Section 5812 of the Internal Revenue Code, or a temporary transfer if the transferor has reason to believe that the transferee will use or intends to use the firearm in a crime, or is prohibited from possessing firearms under the state or federal law, and the transfer takes place, and the transferee's possession of the firearm is exclusively at a shooting range or in a shooting gallery or other designated area for the purpose of target shooting. So that says, as long as I believe that my nephew, who happens to be here and who, might not have a firearms license or have passed all the appropriate backgrounds, if I take him to the firing range, I can transfer my firearm to him while we are at the range teaching him to practice. Next section, while reasonably necessary for the purpose of hunting, trapping, or fishing, if the transferor has no reason to believe that the transferee intends to use the firearm in a place where it is illegal, and has reason to believe that the transferee will comply with all licensing and permit requires for such hunting, trapping, or fishing, or while in the presence of the transferor. So again, back with my nephew, I can transfer my hunting rifle to him for the purposes of hunting dinner for the night. If we're hunters and gatherers, and he's got to go out and hunt that bobcat or that squirrel or whatever it is we're going to eat, he can go out and he can do it. So either I need to know that he is, where it says comply with all license and permit requirements, I have to have reason to believe that he already has a hunting license. And if he doesn't have a hunting license, and I know he doesn't have a hunting license, I can't transfer him that gun to go get us some food. Think about that. The stuff's going to get crazy around here, and if you've got to go hunt your dinner, if you're still a meat eater, and you can't do it, for whatever reason you can't do it, be careful about who you transfer it to, because that could very well be grounds for confiscation of your firearm. And it also says while in the presence of the transferor. So that also means you may have an obligation to be present with them the entire time that they're hunting. Well, if I'm sending them to go do it, maybe I'm trying, while he's hunting, I might be trying to go gather up some berries, hunters and gatherers, but I can't gather the berries because I've got to be there watching him hunt. And it continues on, notwithstanding any other provisions of this chapter, the Attorney General may implement this subsection with regulations. Regulations promulgated under this paragraph may not include any provisions requiring licensees to facilitate transfers in accordance with paragraph 1. But the highlighted part, regulations promulgated under this paragraph may not include any provision requiring persons not licensed under this chapter to keep records of background checks or firearms transfers. So, under this paragraph it says, you may not allow, the states may not require the firearms transfer persons to keep records of the background checks or the firearms transfers. Note it says under this paragraph because that is being done under another section. And the regulations promulgated under this paragraph may not include any provision placing a cap on the fee licensees may charge to facilitate transfers in accordance with the paragraph. So again, here it says very clearly this paragraph is not meant to cap the fees. So, for example, what this does is this just opens the door for who knows how much could be charged. Right now, your firearms transfer fee, I've seen them as low as $25. I've seen it as high as $100. It just depends on who you're getting it through. And where I live, if you're already a firearms licensed carrier, an open licensed carrier, there are a couple places that will just transfer for free. But you have to establish a relationship with them, etc., etc. But just keep that in mind. So what this opens the door here is fees, higher fees. And then finally, the other thing I wanted to highlight about this, and again, you can go read this in greater detail, the rule of construction. Note, nothing in this act or any amendment made by this act shall be construed to authorize the establishment directly or indirectly of a national firearms registry. Okay, so this act says you're not establishing directly or indirectly a national firearms registry. Well, the establishment, who's the establishment? Is that the federal government or is that the state that's actually going to enact these laws or carry out these laws? Who's going to have the registry? Now, we already know when a firearm is transferred from one of the ATF approved dealers or transferors, they're already keeping documentation. Those are carbon copies of those forms, and a copy stays with them. Copies go elsewhere. They get sent to somewhere on the federal level, state level, who knows, wherever they're all getting sent to. But those are carbon copies being made. So if a registry or record is not being kept somewhere, then why are there carbon copies? But, just some stuff for you all to think about. We're going to move on over here and let you look at the, this is the NRA's response. And this is from USA Today, published March 29, 2018, and updated March 23, 2018. It says, under pressure, the NRA voices support for gun violence restraining orders. And that's exactly what these are. These are restraining orders. So Washington facing intense public pressure. The NRA is starting to talk about the types of gun violence restraining orders it will support after years of opposing them. All you NRA members, keep that in mind. Now they're going to start looking at helping to circumvent that Second Amendment right. Indeed, the NRA's support for such measures hinges on a multitude of requirements, which the association says are key to protecting Second Amendment rights and due process. Now that's the key there, and I really appreciate that. And these are the things that they are saying they would be comfortable supporting the restraining orders if these things were in place, and at present they're not. Criminal penalties for those who bring false or frivolous charges. Now, I thought about it, but they spelled it out right here. How many times will you see woman gets mad at the husband, ex-husband, because he didn't pick the kids up on time or he didn't pay his child support on time, so she goes and calls the courts and get his guns taken away. The criminal penalties for those. A determination by a judge by clear and convincing evidence that the person poses a significant risk of danger. Because again, we know people's lives have been destroyed based on a lie. People lie all the time out of envy, out of jealousy, out of, we broke up because I'm mad, I don't want you, and I don't want you to enjoy your life, and et cetera, et cetera. I'm jealous of what you got. Whatever the case may be, people just tell lies. We're just crabs in a barrel, and we try to destroy each other just because we're not where they are. So that being the case, this is critical, and I applaud the NRA for this. I'm not too happy that they're even considering this overall, but I still applaud them. A determination by a judge by clear and convincing evidence. So clear and convincing. Well, what's clear and convincing? What is clear and convincing, and to whom? Now, while the language is there, we know the court systems are questionable at best. We've seen it over and over again. I've seen it, you've seen it, we've all seen it. So I personally would want some more clarification on what's clear and convincing evidence that the person poses a significant risk of danger. A requirement that a judge determine whether the person meets the standard for involuntary commitment. So, are we coming down to clear and convincing evidence would be a requirement, could be a person meeting a standard for involuntary commitment. So, if someone really wanted to do you in, I could see them creating some kind of liar scenario to make you crazy, to somehow get you involuntarily committed, even if it's just for the 3-day assessment. It was involuntary. All it takes is 2 or 3 people. Really, it takes just one person. Really, all it takes is a law enforcement officer, and they will believe their word. But you get 2 or 3 people together. They go to the police, they get their story, the officer buys it. Next thing you know, they're in front of a judge, and you're ordered to do what? To go through an involuntary commitment to a mental place. Now, once that happens, that's clear and convincing evidence. And trust me, in my lifetime of working in the social service field, I've seen it done. Maybe not with firearms, with other things. I've seen people manipulate the state for their own personal gain, their own personal purposes, and have people involuntarily committed to sanitariums. But here, this is something else the NRA is requiring. If the order is granted, the individual should receive community-based mental health treatment. So, that being the case, I appreciate the NRA there, because if the order is granted to take their firearms, what happens next? What are the requirements for them to get their firearms back? Has that been spelled out? And if it requires mental health treatment, who's going to pay for it? Suppose they don't have insurance. Or suppose they cannot afford $50, $60, $75, $100 a visit for mental health care. Then they don't get their firearms back? And that's assuming there really is an issue. But then if there's not a real issue and it's been made up by someone, then they still have to go through this expense of this, the time, the lost work time, the confusion, the opening up their personal business to being scrutinized emotionally and psychologically. Finally, the NRA requests to be effective and constitutional that they should have strong due process protections and require that the person get treatment, is what Cox says in the video. So strong due process. I like that wording, strong due process, but to me, this is still not enough, because this still opens some doors. If the order is granted, the individual should receive community-based, again, spell it out. If it's granted and they receive treatment, what is the goal that needs to be met in order for them to receive their firearm back? Now, mind you, this is not a criminal matter. This is an administrative matter. This will go down in the states as an administrative, which means you're not entitled to an attorney to represent you. You're not entitled to copies of all the information they may have against you while they made their decisions. You're not entitled to anything but to do what they say, to jump as high as they say jump, and as many times as they say jump. And that's it for that one. I wanted to also show here, and this is from the Washington Post, and this is from February 2018. 5 states allow guns to be seized before someone can commit violence. In the wake of massacres similar to Wednesday's school shooting in Parkland, Florida, a small number of states have passed red flag laws that allow the seizure of guns before people can commit acts of violence. So let's pause right there for a minute. So each time there's a school shooting or mass shooting in a particular state, the administrators, the representatives in that state and the people in that state are angered, and they're looking to enact some sort of law or policy that affects the entire state based on that one situation. And did you notice how they're just running around the country, different states? It's not always the same one state. It's different states, and each time it happens in a different state, now you have a whole new set of legislators trying to take up action to limit weapons. Can you see the circumvention of the Second Amendment right this way, state by state? So, and as of that time, as of this writing, lawmakers in 18 other states, including Florida plus D.C., have proposed similar measures. And it says California, Washington, Oregon, Indiana, Connecticut have statutes that can be used to temporarily take guns away from people if a judge deems a threat to themselves or others. Going down, mental illness, escalating threats, substance abuse, and domestic violence are among the circumstances in which a judge can order weapon restrictions under the statutes. Substance abuse. So, if you're in a state that doesn't have recreational marijuana usage and you get caught smoking a joint, are you a substance abuser? And if you're a substance abuser, then you can't have your firearms? Or, in the case of, and I brought this up in another video, the husband and wife that went to Jamaica for vacation, and they, got their smoke on while they were there, and they came back, and I think somebody's job required a drug test, and so they did the drug test, and it came back positive for marijuana. They lost their children to CPS behind that, so now also they get to lose their firearm, potentially. And the things that I highlighted are the ones that I wanted you to note, and I will try to remember to post the links in the video. The approach of the red flag law is to seize guns from people who have them and to restrict their access until they are no longer deemed dangerous. Well, who decides what's dangerous? Who decides what's dangerous? I can personally tell you, I've reported dangerous people, and police have done nothing. Now, I'm from New York, and, we'll call 911 all the time, and they show up an hour, 2 hours later. In the meantime, the person who you were calling the police about, people laying up dead now. And now it's a matter of their taking away a body instead of coming in a reasonable time frame to deal with an issue. So who determines what's dangerous? The law allows family members or law enforcement officers, family members or law enforcement officers to ask the judge for a gun violence restraining order or an extreme risk protection order against someone who behaves the way 19-year-old did. According to news reports, Cruz killed squirrels with a pellet gun. So he killed squirrels with a pellet gun. He trained his, let me stop there. He killed squirrels, so maybe he was practicing his aim. So are we walking down a slippery slope if you use your backyard to practice? And if you happen to eat squirrels and you use a pellet gun, because it's probably not going to bust his body wide open like a regular Full Metal Jacket hollow point, You want the meat. You don't want all the lead mixed up with the meat. So you use the pellet gun. Because he trained his dogs to attack a neighbor's piglets. Yeah, well, that might have been an issue. But you know what? If I were living in the country on a farm somewhere, and I don't know where he lived, but I know if I did, I've always said I would have attack dogs. And I would have my fencing, and I would have 3 or 4 dogs running around the property at all times. Because they're going to help eliminate strange wild animals that I might not want on the property, as well as strange wild human animals that I might not want on the property. So, but he posted on Instagram about guns and killing animals and eventually threatened at least one teen. Well, what was his posts? Guns and killing animals? Well, you know what? You can go to YouTube right now and you can see how many people talk about guns, the different guns that they own, how they use them, how they do, they're rating them. And then they talk about what? Hunting, killing animals. We see how many people, including half of Congress seems like, going over to some of the other countries and killing animals for sport. But because this boy was doing it and posted it on social media, that meant he was potentially unsafe. So that means all of those who are posting about killing crocodiles and elephants and giraffes and all these other animals, they're unsafe too. But he eventually threatened at least one teen. Well, we don't know the details of that threat. They haven't shared it. But how many of us have threatened somebody in our lifetime? I personally have. And it was in the middle of a situation and they did something way, way beyond. And in that moment, I lost my goody two-shoes self, and I let them have it and told them what I would do if they showed up at my house again. So, you got to put things in perspective. Now, I don't know the details of this boy. Actually, I didn't take time to follow his story just because I saw it immediately as just another effort to be used to manipulate the weapons possessions for people, and that was my immediate thought. And I think like that. Why? Because if a government can take down thousands of people in that World Trade Center situation, 20, 30, 40 kids at a school don't mean anything to them. If they can take down thousands, 20, 30 kids mean nothing to them. But they say he showed signs of depression and had been treated at a mental health clinic. Well, all of us in life, if you keep living long enough, you're going to be depressed at some point. You're going to show the signs. Somebody's going to die. Your girlfriend's going to break up with you. Your dog's going to die. You're not going to get the job that you really wanted. Life is not turning out the way you want it. Everyone's going to have depression at some point in life. Doesn't mean you're a threat. Does not mean you're a threat. And I personally stand against that. It really bothers me that people will assume someone showing signs of depression would be a threat. There are too many illnesses that have similar signs with depression. And if a doctor is not thorough enough, a doctor, especially when it comes to women, will immediately diagnose her as depressed and not even go any further to see that it's really some other illness. That's something I've personally lived, and I've seen other people live it as well. So, again, to me, that's not a good qualifier. And have been treated at a mental health clinic. Again, just because you're treated doesn't mean you're dangerous. Doesn't mean you're a danger to self or others. Most people, if they feel like something is wrong, will go get, I won't say most people, many people will go get help. And where do you get help? At a mental health clinic or a mental health doctor's office. I personally, you've seen my video, I recommend everyone have a therapist. And there are some parameters by which I recommend you do it, but I recommend everyone have some sort of therapist. So just because you're treated at a mental health clinic doesn't mean you're dangerous. That just means you're going through a rough patch and you did what you were supposed to do. You went and you got help. And hopefully they helped you put those pieces together and you were able to move on. Let's go down. In an Everytown study of mass shootings from 2009 to 2016, 40% of the attackers had shown warning signs of violent behavior. So again, what's violent behavior? Again, so all of this is subjective. It's whomever's looking at it for that day. I can tell you, just as a native New Yorker, when we get excited, we get into something that we're passionate about, we get stirred up. If you're not from New York, if you don't know that flow, then you will automatically assume that that person is violent and angry and dangerous and all these other things. It's not that. That's just the way we flow when we get into something passionate. And if you got a person who's very passionate, when they're saying something you like or doing something that you like, their passion is okay. But as soon as you want to use that passion against them, you want to say it's potentially violent. Miss me with it. Miss me with it. further on down, a judge can quickly order the weapon surrendered if convinced of the threat. Within a few weeks, a full hearing is held in longer-term restriction on longer-term restrictions, which can last a year. Judges must allow people who want their weapons back to revisit the ruling. So you must be able to come back and revisit the ruling, but that doesn't say the judge have to give it back to you. And they can do them for up to a year at a time each time. In Connecticut, only law enforcement agents can ask for a risk warrant, and in Indiana, law enforcement can confiscate weapons without a judge's order. In Indiana, law enforcement, someone can tell them something and they can just come take up your stuff. They don't need a judge's order. And then the gun owner must go to court to try to get your weapons back. Really? Really? Let's move on. Washington State Initiative 1639, changes to gun ownership and purchase requirements measure. This was effected in 2018. And you can go and see it. I'll try to remember to put the link. But the thing I wanted to focus on here was in the revised Code of Washington, a signed application to purchase a pistol constitutes a waiver of confidentiality, so that any inquiring court or law enforcement agency may request a mental health institution or other health care facility to release information relevant to a person's eligibility to purchase a pistol. The measure would expand this provision to include the application for and purchase of semi-automatic rifles. So we just said here, you've just waived all your medical confidentiality. To any court that asks, any law enforcement agency that asks, and they're not just mental. It's not just mental. You see, they do other healthcare facility. So we're not just looking for mental health, other healthcare. So if you have diabetes, and you go to Jimmy John's clinic down the street, and you see your diabetic doctor, your endocrinologist, and you deal with it. They have the right now to access your medical records there. Now, of course, we have HIPAA and this, they already have access to stuff. But this gives them the legal right to do it. Because the other ways, if you don't give legal right, they technically are not supposed to be doing it. So they're obtaining the information illegally and can't use it against you. Now, when you do this, you've signed a waiver, and now they have the legal right to use the information that they're probably already getting illegally anyway. But that's big. That's big. In order to get a firearm, you must now open up all your mental and all your healthcare records to any police agency or law enforcement agency, or any court. Really? Any inquiring court. It doesn't just say the court that is processing, the risk assessment. It says any court. So that means I live in Washington. Suppose a court in Virginia inquires, and they give what sounds like a good excuse. So now Virginia can access my stuff just because I want a firearms license in Washington? Got an issue with that. Waiting period under the measure. A dealer could not deliver a semi-automatic assault rifle to a purchaser until 10 days have passed from the date of the application for purchase. So they got to apply and wait 10 days. Firearm storage requirements. This is the other biggie. Under the measure, a person who left a firearm in a place where a prohibited person, someone who's prohibited from firearm possession under state or federal law, could potentially gain access to the firearm would be guilty of community endangerment, a Class C felony, if a prohibited person gained access to the firearm. So when I read that, I hear, if I have my firearm in the home with me, it's in the bathroom on the counter, and I decide to go take a shower. And so I'm taking my shower, and I'm in the shower, and the firearm's sitting on the counter. And what happens? Someone breaks into the house at that moment, and they're robbing me blind, and they come in the bathroom and they take my firearm. So when I come out the shower, I realize it's gone. And then I also realize I get to go to jail for a Class C felony because I had my firearm in the shower with me. So what they want you to do now is put a lock on it. Put a lock on it. A lock designed to stop the unauthorized use. And the other thing they want you to do is put it in storage. So I'm a female. I live at home by myself. What good is the gun going to do me sitting in storage and I'm in the shower? Someone's coming in to kill me. They got me dead before I could even make it out the shower to wherever the storage device is, to the safe. But now, mind you, it doesn't say you're guilty of that Class C felony if the person gains access to it and uses it. It says if they gain access, period. If they gain access, period. So now you get to go to jail or have your record and your legal firearms right taken away because someone breaks into your house and steals your gun? Come on now. Come on. We're doing too much. Under the measure, a person under 21 years of age could not purchase a pistol or semi-automatic rifle. Now, in many states, at the age of 18, you can have a regular firearm, a handgun in your home for safety. But now, under 21, you can't purchase it. Not just the semi-automatic rifles, but a regular handgun. Persons between the age of 18 to 21 would be able to possess a pistol or semi-automatic assault rifle under the following conditions. In the residence. You can have it in your residence, but how are you going to get it if you can't buy it at the age of 18 or 19? How are you going to get it if you can't buy it? Okay. In your fixed place of business. Again, if you can't buy it, how can you get it if you own a business? On real property under the person's control. So real property under, your house sitting and for 6 months, real property. Okay. Or for the specific purpose of moving to a new place of residence, traveling to and from these allowed locations, and selling or transferring the firearm in accordance with other provisions. Now, 18 to 21, you can possess the firearm. You can possess it. Not just a semi-automatic assault rifle, but now we're talking about a regular pistol, but you can't purchase it. So how you going to get it? Someone has to buy it and give it to you. So now we open another can of worms, because if they want to make a big deal about that, that leaves, your mama who bought it for you and gave it to you because you met all the requirements at that time to keep in your home. If it becomes an issue and they want to stick it to you, they're going to turn around and stick it to her too and take her license away and take her firearms as well. Slippery slope, people. Slippery slope. Slippery, slippery slope. And then here's just on Texas. Thankfully, Texas Republicans squelched the red flag gun laws prospects. This is from U.S. News, August 2018. We know in the Galveston area, there was a mass shooting. And again, like I said earlier, each time there's a mass shooting in a school somewhere, shortly thereafter, legislators in that state are trying to restrict gun access that people they deem dangerous to themselves or others. But in the aftermath of the May 18th attack at Santa Fe High School, Republican Governor Greg Abbott suggested that Texas should look for ways to keep guns away from people who pose an immediate danger to others, which is the point of so-called red flag laws like those passed by 6 states since February massacre at high school in Parkland, Florida. Well, Texas is an open carry state. Texans believe in their weapons, and in Texas, especially in some of the rural parts or smaller cities, you will see people walking around with their assault rifles on their shoulder, properly maintained, all under the requirements, etc., etc. In the cities, you see people walking around regularly with their firearms on their side or, wherever they have them. Because Texas is an open carry state, and all those people, I would assume, who are carrying their firearms are proper and legal and licensed. I mean, if I weren't legal to carry mine, I sure wouldn't be walking around the street with it. So, but Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, who presides over the Texas Senate, was even more forceful. He said flat out, "I have never supported these policies, nor has the majority of the Texas Senate," he said, minutes after the last in a series of state Senate hearings on gun violence. The 1-2 punch by state's top Republicans drew cheers from gun rights advocates in a state that has more than 1.2 million handgun license holders and allows open carry in public of handguns and long rifles. Texas current law, as I said earlier, Texas can deny a handgun license based on a person's mental health history. But that restriction applies to the license to carry a handgun, not buying one. So yeah, they can still buy one. They can have one in their home. So here's my question. If I had a history of PTSD from being raped at the age of 18, I'm now 30. I don't have a right to carry a handgun license. To carry a handgun. I've dealt with it. I've gotten the treatment, the care, etc., etc. So we want to be careful with that. Texas has that in place, and most states have it in place already. But Texas, the state can seize weapons from people determined to be in a mental crisis in some circumstances. Yes, so, and we do have, there are ways that you can, notify the proper authorities if there is an issue. That's already in place. So the activists, rightfully so, worry that expanding the red flag laws would allow government to seize someone's guns based on suspicion of a threat or a false report without that person having acted violently. And that's what I'm concerned about. Red flag laws are nothing more than ways to take guns out of the hands of law-abiding persons, or nothing more than a mere suspicion. And in my opinion, that's exactly what it is. You're not dealing with the people with the mental health issues. You got a federal registry, no-fly registry. You've got terror watch lists. You've got all the other lists. Well, you know what? When someone establishes a mental health history, you have your mandatory reporters for different things. If there is a mental health history that is so severe that the mental health provider feels that the person may not be able to overcome it or get through it, and that doesn't mean when they walk into them they're diagnosed with whatever the condition. That means you've treated them for a while and you see they're not going to be able to get beyond it safely. Then you add them to that registry. And so when the background check is done, that registry is checked. But to just blanket tell everybody no, they can't just because some people did, what are we doing? We're taking the guns out of the hands of law-abiding citizens for the mere suspicion. So that's it. Just be aware of it. Take action. Do what you need to do. Protect yourself. Protect your interest. I'm a bit concerned, but just know that Donald Trump ran, part of his campaign was that he would not attack our gun laws. He would not seek to restrict our right to bear arms. He was not going to deal with that. Well, guess what? President Trump is on board with this. Your President Trump is on board with these red flag gun laws. So you got the NRA coming around. Trying to come around. You got Trump on board. You've got a Democratic House and a Republican Senate, and both of them are on board as well because it's a bipartisan bill. People pay attention. That being the case, like I said, take the action that you need to take. And I would just recommend people just go get hunting, fishing, boating, get every daggone license. Cabela's, Academy, Walmart, wherever you get your licenses from, go ahead and get every license. Because when the climate in this country changes, if you have to take action to survive, if you've got to shoot a squirrel, if you've got to shoot a rabbit, if you've got to shoot a snake trying to come up the stairs in the front of your house, you need to be able to do so. And in the country, that's what we do. You don't run the snake off because he's just going to come back as soon as you're not looking. You get your shotgun and you pump one in him and make sure he don't come back. So, that being said, let me know what you think. Take care and be blessed.